Welcome to Monday Evenings with the Maestro. My name is John Devlin, the music director of the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra, and I'm so excited to welcome you to episode 5. And you'll notice if you've watched episodes 1 through 4 that tonight looks nothing like those explorations of the Seventh Symphony of Beethoven, which I enjoyed so much. Because tonight we are announcing a concert that is going to take place on Thursday night, May 28th at 8 p.m., simultaneously broadcast on Facebook Live and YouTube. This concert is going to serve as a 90th anniversary closing celebration for the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra, and our players are going to present digitally a concert for our community. As part of this concert, we are replicating in a fun way the concert we would have had at the Capitol Theater with our full group, and in this way we're going to present the music of composers Sarah Kirkland Schneider, Tchaikovsky, Ravel, and Shostakovich in a way that's new to us, but we think you're really going to enjoy. So now I'm going to proceed with some interviews. First, we're going to work and have a talk with Betsy Delk, our interim executive director, and we're going to talk about the ethos behind the concert, how it's constructed, and some of the things that you're going to be able to look forward to. We're also going to talk with Sarah Kirkland Schneider, one of the composers featured on that concert. And then finally, we'll talk with Roy Mazzare, our principal clarinetist, who is going to be a featured performer on that evening's event. So thank you for being here with us on Monday Evenings with the Maestro. We look forward to the conversations ahead and to seeing you on Thursday, May 28th at 8 p.m. for our season-ending concert. Thank you so much for joining us. And we are the Wheeling Symphony, your community in concert. Let's have our talks. Welcome, Betsy. What can you tell us about the concert?
Well, the first thing I can tell you about the concert is I'm thrilled that we all have something to put on our calendars. I'm tired of seeing all of those empty pages and empty squares with nothing to really look forward to. And I think that's one of the things that I've missed most during this time is not having those special things to look forward to, whether it's something as momentous as a graduation or as small as being able to be with your family members and reach out and hug them and touch them the way that we used to be able to do and look forward to doing again soon. So I am looking forward to the concert. I think it's going to be a really nice way for our community who has missed having the opportunity to be with us in person, to have a chance to connect again with our musicians and of course with you and with each other by knowing that people all over our community and really around the world, because we'll be on the internet, are connecting together through watching a wonderful concert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been so excited to work with you and the rest of our wonderful team in the virtual office that we have these days and figure out a way to come close to replicating the experience we would have had in the concert hall. And one of the ways that we did this, I think, was being very inventive in how we put together the program, which will be about an hour. And of course, musically, what we did was we looked at the program and said, well, why don't we present the same composers that we would have heard in the concert hall and even the same soloist, right? And so we're going to hear music by Sarah Kirkland Schneider, by Tchaikovsky, Shostakovich, and Ravel, and all of these pieces will be performed by our talented WSO musicians. But one of the other things that I think is so important about this event are some of the things that you were so instrumental in designing, the other ways we're going to unite our community around this 90th anniversary celebration. Would you be so kind as to share with our audience a couple of those?
Sure. People who are regular attenders of the Wheeling Symphony know that at our final concert of the year, one of the very special things about that concert is the announcement and introduction of our Rachel Warby Scholarship winners. And of course, everyone knows that Rachel Warby, one of our previous music directors, was a real trailblazer as being one of the very few female conductors at that time. And still today. And there is a scholarship endowed in her name. And it just really blows my mind every year to listen to the descriptions of the students who are those award winners, how dedicated they are to their craft, their plans for the future. So we are very excited that this year the 2 Rachel Warby Scholarship recipients will be a part of our concert on the 28th, and they're each going to tell us a little bit about themselves and provide us with a small performance. So I really look forward to that because connecting with all musicians is wonderful, but connecting with our very youngest musicians is always really exciting. Mm-hmm. And as everyone also knows, we have another arm of the Wheeling Symphony, which is the Wheeling Symphony Youth Orchestra, and their conductor is the beloved Ben Podolsky. And all of the many hundreds of students who have had Mr. Podolsky as a teacher really love him. He's very kind to students and really makes a great connection with them. And in his name, we have the Ben Podolsky Scholarship. And the winner of that scholarship will actually be revealed for the first time during our concert on the 28th. So that's going to be exciting. And I'm sure a lot of our youth orchestra members will be tuning in to find out who the recipient of that award is.
Yes. And, you know, I am new to the WSO family this year, of course, and 90 years of history behind us. It leaves a remarkable trajectory of meaningful people who have impacted the WSO in so many ways. And one of the beautiful things that I've been able to be a part of, along with your planning, is inviting some of those people back to give a happy birthday message and reconnect with the symphony. And I think it would be fun to leave that list probably a secret until that night. And people are going to be so excited probably by who they see on their screen wishing us a happy birthday.
I agree. I think people will be taking a nice little trip down memory lane and seeing some current and former members of the Wheeling Symphony family.
Yeah. And so I think that's a really beautiful overview of some of the special elements with this concert. And I think that the conversations I'm going to have with Rowie, our principal clarinetist, and with Sarah Kirkland Schneider, our featured composer for that evening, are going to shed a nice light on what we're going to do as part of our performance aspect for the concert. And I know we're both really looking forward to hearing the wonderful music by our players.
For sure. I think it's going to be really exciting to see the way their individual performances are knitted together into something really special.
Yeah. Well, Betsy, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Monday evenings with the Maestro. And we look forward to, in a week and a half's time, sharing a musical adventure with our community via the internet for the first time. It's going to be exciting.
I agree. And this has been a real honor to be on Monday evenings with the Maestro because I've only been able to watch from the comfort of my home. So it's very exciting to be a part of it.
Yeah. And, you know, for the community, this is the first time we veered out of the Beethoven 7th Symphony lane as part of Monday evenings with the Maestro, but we are really excited to go some different directions with this program. And we're going to have interviews like this one that allow people to get better know the community around the Wheeling Symphony. That's such an important part of the final product, which you see on the stage. But we have a whole team that works so hard to make that happen. And you are, of course, our leader. And we thank you for everything you do, Betsy.
Well, thank you. If I'm the leader, you are the beating heart of the organization. You're driving us forward all the time.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you again next Thursday night around the concert.
Sounds great. Thanks, John.
Bye-bye. Not be more excited because one of the questions I get asked the most is, who is your favorite living composer? And well, Sarah Kirkland Schneider is here. And I am so excited to be joined by her on Zoom here. And it's a little bit bittersweet because last Friday would have been the day that you were going to join us in Wheeling for the concert we were supposed to have performed with your piece as a featured part of it, Something for the Dark. But we're here today doing something different. And then next Thursday, we're going to hear a lot of your music on our virtual 90th anniversary celebration. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, John. It's such a pleasure to see you, and you're so kind, and I'm so flattered by everything you just said, and delighted to be here and excited about your new experience with this orchestra. It's really exciting.
Yeah, and it was such a nice time to get a chance to chat for a few minutes before we dove into the recording here. And we're talking about our situations with our families, and you know, you're in Princeton right now, right?
Yes, in Princeton, New Jersey. Yeah.
Yeah, and so tell us a little bit about what it feels like to be a composer or two composers in quarantine together. How is this affecting you artistically, and how are you as a person?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, normally we're homebodies for the most part. Unless we're traveling, we're sort of, my husband and I both work at home already. So in that sense, it's not a huge change, but we have two kids who are home for, or being homeschooled now, that we're responsible for coordinating their homeschooling. So that is certainly a big change. And that's been the biggest adjustment, is figuring out how to split our time. We trade off, and who's helping the kids and who's having study or work time, composing time. We're figuring it out now. I think week 8, we're starting to, it's taken a little while, but we're getting into a rhythm with it. And we feel lucky because we've got, a yard and access to the woods through our yard. And so we can get out and get some nature and fresh air, and can't complain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this word rhythm. And to me, this is the first time since I became an artist that I have felt completely out of rhythm. Because I think, at least for conductors, we are on such a regular schedule. We close the final page of one score for one week, and the next thing we do is open the first page of a score for the next week, and we assume, why would we not, that concert's going to happen?
Yeah.
And for me, I felt this tremendous yearning, and it's no surprise to be back on the podium, but more, I realized I was taking for granted this cycle of performance opportunity. And it felt a little laborious because we have this concert, we have to get ready for it. And one of the beautiful things for me during this period has been going back to pieces that ignited my love of music when it wasn't my job. And that brought me into classical music. Listening to them, I've started playing my clarinet every day again, which is not something that during a normal time I can do. And I've been exploring new music all over the place, of all genres. And I'm wondering, are there some things that you've been able to do during this time? Of course, like you said, your work can almost continue in the same fashion, but have you had some new experiences during this time that you wouldn't have had a chance to if it were normal times?
Well, it's interesting what you say about going back to the music that initially inspired you, because I found myself, I don't know, just sort of feeling a bit more sentimental or thinking about past and future more. I think it's a profound moment that we're living in, this idea of a global pandemic and what that means for our futures and our careers for the next year and a half, possibly 2 years, So it makes you think a lot about the big questions, the big picture. And so I've been going back to older pieces that I loved, and older records, older even bands that I listened to in college. I've been going back and sort of mining that territory of music that I haven't listened to in 20 years and thinking about the ways that all these different pieces of music inspired me. So that's been interesting. I've also, like you, been seeking out some new things, listening online, listening to online concerts, as much as I can. So that's been fun. I've also been playing piano more, like you said, with clarinet. I've been going back to the piano and playing some old Chopin or Debussy, Schumann, just to, I don't know, feel in touch with music in a tactile, performative way, even though it's just me, I who's performing it, So, I think it's sort of getting back to the basics, the roots of what drew us to music in the first place. It's hard not to think about this when you're thinking like, wow, this is a big moment. It sort of reframes your thinking in this broader way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, like knowing that I was going to perform on this concert we're going to have next week, I found myself like doing something that I hadn't done in years and spending an hour on one measure if it was really hard, and having to get it perfect. Whereas look, as a conductor, usually what I'm doing when I'm playing the clarinet is revisiting something from the past or playing music that I'm about to conduct in a way that, like you said, it has that tactile feel, but it wasn't worth it to spend an hour to fix one technical thing that's really difficult in this measure 82, because I have to conduct every measure of the whole piece next week,
Right,
and so revisiting what my musicians actually go through to be able to play Stravinsky or Schneider on a stage that is a great
Yeah,
revisiting for us, I think. And then I'm very
absolutely.
intrigued to hear from you. You mentioned, oh, you've gone back to music from other genres, bands, and even
Mhm.
and records and stuff from the past. Can you please share with us two or three of the ones that you revisited first or meant the most to you?
Sure. It's funny, I've been getting really into Elliott Smith, the singer-songwriter from
Mhm.
the late 90s, early 00s, whose music I really loved then, but hadn't listened to in like 20 years. And it's been really fun because I've been playing a lot of his catalog for the kids and teaching them about, yeah, and listening to these old songs, I sort of realized like how much of my DNA was rooted, musically speaking, was rooted in a lot of what he was doing. And bands like Slater Kinney and PJ Harvey and gosh, what else have I been listening to? I did some Smashing Pumpkins recently, but it's like all these bands from the 90s that, when I was like a teenager and in my 20s, really got into my musical DNA. And it's been fun to sort of go back and realize like, oh, that's where that part of Penelope came from, or, that's where this thing in Unremembered came from. Um, what I think of my music stylistically on sort of a continuum. And a piece like Penelope is a bit on the poppier side of what I do because I grew up loving so much popular music. And so a lot of that music really directly inspired Penelope. And a piece like Unremembered, which is also, on the poppier side of my continuum.
Right.
So,
And earlier I was not lying when I said that your music is the music that I'm most attracted to by someone that's producing right now. And um, I think that what you've just said, the audience in Wheeling knows all the time. I'm talking about the pop music, the non-classical music. Growing
yeah,
up, I was born in 1985, right? So I grew up with the bands in the 90s, especially like ska punk and emo.
yeah,
Then getting into like the Strokes and the White Stripes and that type of rock in the
yeah,
aughts, and how much it inspired me. And I like the ska punk, for example. I
uh-huh,
loved hearing horns in a band. Usually
yeah,
there's two singers with a high harmony line. And of course, in Penelope, it's one singer, but often there's overlays of multiple vocal lines moving in parallel motion
mhm,
and a drum set, right?
yeah,
And I wouldn't say it's like in Penelope, it's necessarily like the same, just like riding a beat the whole time. It's a little bit more artistic. But those are the sounds that attract me. And as a conductor in today's generation, it doesn't off put me at all to hear those elements and the rock and the repetitive and the maybe
mm,
even the chorus verse bridge structure being part of what we do just as much as the rondo or the sonata. And
mhm,
so that's why I think when you mentioned Penelope, I have on my little list here of things to check in with you about. Like that was the start of our relationship together when I
yeah,
was in Princeton conducting that piece, and my mind was just changed about what a concert could be, not just in terms of the sounds of your music, but that size of an ensemble.
mhm,
And the fact that most orchestras don't touch that music except if it's in a special series right out of the concert hall or something. And
yeah, right.
and one of the things that I think we're about to embark on is a forced limitation of ensemble and audience size
Mhm,
by the results of the pandemic, because while your favorite restaurant might open up for outdoor seating and takeout, we are not going to be able to be in our 2,400 seat concert hall probably for a while. And I just want to let you know that as a programmer, I am excited for somebody like you who has, you look at your catalog, you have a handful of big orchestral pieces, but so many of your other pieces are for these mixed smaller ensembles. And I cannot wait until this becomes the norm that we program this way. How do you feel about the way that smaller pieces and ensembles and more and things that don't utilize a full orchestra will play a role going forward?
yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's exciting to think about the orchestral medium becoming a bit more flexible, and composers writing for more flexible instrumentation, and the orchestra becoming perhaps more modular. We'll always have that great repertoire of all the amazing music written for large orchestra. But I agree that it's nice to have a variety of sizes and different levels of intimacy with the audience. I think it's a good thing.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Because of course, there are stalwart ensembles that perform 52 weeks a year. They might have a core of 81 musicians, and they have to produce repertoire and concerts in a predictable cycle with a large audience to fund the tremendous fixed costs. I
Mhm.
feel very lucky to be in Wheeling here, where we have, we pay our musicians as we design a concert and we go. There's a guaranteed number of services for our contracted musicians every year, of course, but we are free to experiment. And when I was interviewing for this position, one of the things I said was, I am going to experiment. Not every concert is going to feature the full orchestra or have strings in it or not have a rock band involved. And now all of a sudden you're seeing, look, of course, I grew up in New York. Having the New York Philharmonic not be performing is tragic to me. But
Yeah.
I do think that there's a model for orchestras of about the size of Wheeling and maybe a little bigger or smaller to be the torchbearers as we come back, because we've been lucky enough to not lay off our staff, and we continue to design and plan because we have very little fixed costs, because we pay the musicians for the services we need, and it will enable us to come back and maybe do lots more concerts than we would have done, but with smaller groups.
Yes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's
Yeah. And
exciting.
so we thank people like you who have been already putting out music that is going to find a very, very welcoming home on those types of concerts too.
Great.
Um, but that
Yeah.
that said, why don't we talk a little bit about the concert that's coming up next week, which is a perfect example of this, because we are going to visit Penelope, and you wrote that version for quintet plus drums, and we're going to perform the interludes from that with our quintet. Could you let us know a little bit about Penelope? And of course, it's just a very small piece of the puzzle, these interludes with no singer,
Sure.
but
Sure.
what are we going to hear?
Yeah, sure. So Penelope is sort of a modern day um, take on the Odyssey, told from the perspective of Penelope, the wife waiting faithfully at home for Odysseus. But it's sort of a modern story about a couple, a woman who lives alone in this house by the sea, and one day she hears a knock at the door, and it turns out to be her long lost husband, whom she hasn't seen in 20 years. They had gotten divorced. He'd been off at war, some unnamed war. She takes him in because he remembers the home. He has amnesia. He doesn't really remember her, but she takes him in and tries to nurse him back to health. She reads to him from the Odyssey. And in the course of reading to him through the Odyssey, she sort of finds a way into his memory and his former sense of self, and he starts to recover his sense of self. And so the interludes actually are some of the moments during this music, I should say, started out originally as a play written by Ella McLaughlin, which she performed live as Penelope, the monodrama, her and string quartet. And in the moments where her character would read to Odysseus from the Odyssey, we would have this music playing, which was the interludes music. And it was music for just string quartet, meant to sort of evoke ancient recitations of Greek lyric poetry. So that strum that you hear repeatedly through the interludes is meant to be evocative of the Greek lyre. And Ellen would read these passages from the Odyssey. So the first interlude, I believe, is called The Honeyed Fruit, and it's sort of thinking back about Odysseus looking at his men right after a battle and wishing that he could bring them home, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And then I Died of Waiting is a moment where she reads a passage where Odysseus' mother is speaking to him from the underworld, and she's saying that she died of waiting for him to come home. And then the last one, I think, is called And Then You Shall Be Lost, or yeah. And that's where there's this Tiresias, this character, prophesies that Odysseus will be lost at sea forever. So it's just these little glimpses into the narrative of the Odyssey itself. And these moments musically are just meant to be meditative and reflective. They sort of serve as just a moment of reflection in between the movements where they're singing. So they're very simple, very meditative and spare.
Right. And I think that that is a great feeling world to live in now. We need to take moments to reflect and be still. And there's almost a hypnotic element to the way that that those pieces sound to me. Um,
Mm. Mhm.
the other music that we're going to hear is a piece that I learned about during this period because we were programming this concert, and you suggested Thread and Fray, a trio for percussion playing marimba, bass, clarinet, and viola. Not your typical trio. Tell us about this piece.
Yeah, no, it's not your typical trio. This was I wrote this piece in 2006 when I was a student at the Aspen Music Festival, and they'd given us this, this small ensemble that we could write for of 8 instruments. And I just chose those 3 because I've always loved those 3 instruments in particular, and I thought that they have a certain something in common. Moodily, is that a word? I don't know. Mood wise, there's a darkness and a richness and sort of a gritty character, I think, to the viola and the bass clarinet and the marimba. Together they have this beautiful warmth. So yeah, I just thought I would try putting them together, and the piece resulted. So that it starts with a single line melody, and then it kind of fragments into close canon with the 3 lines of counterpoint, and it sort of comes in and out of that, and that's why I called it Thread and Fray.
Yeah, and I think it serves as a beautiful contrast to the Penelope interlude with feeling sets. And the people that we've hired from our orchestra are so excited to play this piece because they didn't know of it. And that's one of the other beautiful things that we are dealing with right now, where this creative programming we have to do is exposing other sides of composers where, you're not going to spend a lot of your day trying to get people to play your trio from Aspen, a decade ago. But here we go, because we had to adapt. More of your music is becoming played. It's becoming aware to me. And then I think, leading into kind of a good last area for us today is, of course, we had to postpone this concert where we would have heard something for the dark. But would you mind giving us a preview of what we'll hear when we do end up programming that piece 2 years from now? And also, of course, we hope that you would be here and the community could meet you in person then.
Absolutely, that would be fantastic. Yeah. Something for the dark I wrote for the Detroit Symphony a few years ago, 2015, and it's a 12-minute piece. I think loosely it's a story of endurance. It's about perseverance. It's about the wisdom that comes from experiencing trauma and coming out of that on the other side to find a new way of being in the world. It starts actually with this very kind of bombastic statement of hope, this very bold, I thought of it as like a very bold, shiny theme. And I didn't know where I was going with it initially. I just thought I would let it see where it took me. And this theme goes on this journey. It starts out very optimistic, and then some darkness creeps in and bad things start happening to this theme, and it undergoes a series of challenges. And then another theme arises in its stead, which is more childlike and simplistic. And we start to realize that that's growing on this other life course. And eventually the music finds its way back to some of the music from the beginning. But at that point, the music has been changed quite extraordinarily. So it's really about this journey of rebirth and change, and how we adapt to adversity. And I realized after I'd written it that it was sort of, I think I'd been subconsciously inspired by the story of Detroit itself. I had one of my best friends lives there now, and she was very active in this urban homesteading movement where they're taking these old decrepit neighborhoods and turning them into organic farms and trying to rehabilitate the homes and the houses. And so I was thinking a lot about the change that Detroit had undergone, and I think in a lot of ways that was where the piece's structure came from. And just the final thing I'll say is that the title comes from a poem by a Detroit-based poet. He's no longer alive, but Philip Levine was born and raised in Detroit and wrote a lot about the Detroit working class. And so the title comes from a poem that he wrote about endurance.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And, so many of the things that you just said inspired the piece and the musical journey that you go on with the thematic material in the piece. Part of the reason that I thought that piece would be an appropriate thing for me to program on my final concert of the first season here is that message, because, Wheeling is a city that has undergone, on a smaller scale, of course, than Detroit, but something similar. We used to have 150,000 people live here, and now it's 27,000. And we were reliant here on an energy industry that is rapidly changing. And this city used to be incredibly vibrant in terms of the industry downtown, and now every other building is abandoned. And that's okay. But like you talked about the rebirth and the regeneration, we're trying to find, partly through the arts and through the energy of all the people that are working hard in this city, to find that new pathway and find new purpose for this infrastructure that was built for something else.
Yes.
And so I really like the message you're talking about Detroit, and maybe we'll end on this final question. The world is going through a period of time where we're going to need to rebuild, and the infrastructure that was there operating for something else is now still in many ways, right? What do you think the role of artists is going to be in the recovery, not just economically, that's a separate question, I think, but for our souls? Like, where do you think we fall into this pattern of healing, something that I know you think a lot about as you write music?
Well, yeah, I think the arts in general, gosh, it's hard to imagine humanity without art, right? That's our greatest expression of humanity is art. So I think art of all kinds is what inspires and reminds us of what it means to be human, and inspires us to sort of push forward and keep surviving and trying to create, whether your version of creation is working at a business or or creating art, or whatever it is that you do, we all need to be inspired by something. And usually it's something divine or something artistic. And for a lot of us, myself included, art is the divine. And that is sort of where I get a sense of spiritual, a sense of moving forward, calling forward is when I'm inspired by art. So I know a lot of people for whom this is the same, who will be looking to performance of all kinds, and visual art and dance, and everything that we need to do as a shared experience of our humanity, not just from behind a computer, but live together in the same room. All of that is I think it's so essential to the core of our existence as human beings, that I can't imagine that it will do anything other than, it will play a huge role in our development and moving out of this. I think for a long time, we're going to need to use the computer to sort of guide our experience in this way, because it's the only way we can really share art together in a large group. But I think once everything gets back to normal, perhaps once there's a vaccine, we're going to be hungrier than ever for artistic experience. So,
yeah. And, you mentioned once there's a vaccine. I think for me, look, we knew how to go back into our homes, be with our families, use the computer. And of course, the thing that needs to be said, right? The frontline workers and the people that have experienced the disease, or people in their family that is the real tragedy right now, and the real heroism right now.
Right.
But there's going to be a time when we're all going to step out of our homes, be it in a week or a month, several months, a year, and we're going to feel risk just by doing things that used to be normal. And I hope that the arts are worth that risk when we decide it's the right time to take it, because we want to be part of the thing that makes us feel normal and makes us feel healed. And I pledge as the music director of this city's orchestra to not just go back to business as normal, but embrace the fact that we are responding to something that none of us expected and none of us have been through before. And
Yeah.
part of that is going to be working with people like Sarah and expressing their music more passionately than we ever have, and thinking carefully, not just about what the music sounds like, but what it means. And I'm excited to be going on that journey with the team here in Wheeling and our musicians and our board and community, so that we are fulfilling that role in the best way possible.
Absolutely. I mean, you can only imagine how much passion all these musicians are going to feel playing whatever they're playing after this is all over. I think it's going to be a really moving time for everyone. Very moving experience.
And so I'm glad that our musicians will be playing your music as we begin this concertizing process leading to healing next week on Thursday, May 28th at 8 p.m. And Sarah, thank you so much for being willing to be part of this discussion and that concert in such a meaningful way. We truly appreciate your artistry.
Thank you so much, Sean. It's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me and for performing my music. I'm really excited about it. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are so excited to welcome to Monday Evenings with the Maestro, Roe Mazzari, who is the principal clarinetist of the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra and who is going to be one of the featured performers that evening. Welcome, Roe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure. And so one of the things that I'm sure our audience tonight can't wait to hear about is going to be what is going to be performed on this concert. And I think we're really excited because what we've done is we've reshaped the concert that we would have performed in the Capitol this month as our 90th birthday celebration. And we've found a way to feature each of the composers, but in a chamber music setting. And you're going to be doing a couple of different things. I think you're going to feature Maurice Ravel's music in the Mother Goose Suite. Can you tell us a little bit about this kind of family-friendly piece?
So this piece, I actually played it when I was in school, but in an orchestra version. It's gorgeous, very picturesque. For this concert, we're going to play an arrangement in 3 movements. It's for clarinet, flute, violin, cello, and piano. It's specially done for our concert. And there is a moment in it, or I should say a movement that is like Beauty and the Beast. I don't want to ruin it too much. I'll leave it to you to listen.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that's so beautiful about that music is, like you said, the picturesque quality. It's this beautiful suite that's actually written originally for big orchestra. Like I know, like in the orchestral version, the Beast is represented by the contrabassoon. And so I'm looking forward, because of course I've never heard this arrangement, to see how all of those pictures are created by your ensemble. And the other thing I'm really excited to discuss with you is what we're going to be doing together, because of course it doesn't make much for me to serve on this concert as a conductor when everything is going to be recorded with social distancing in mind. So do you want to let people know the little project that you came up with that you and I are going to do together?
Sure. We are going to be playing 4 short duets. But before I even get to the duets, I can't tell you how excited I am to play with Maestro Devlin. I mean, what are the chances that my boss is a clarinetist, and actually a very good one? So we're gonna have a blast. We're gonna play two duets are from composers that I'm not even sure I know who they are, but the other ones are Bach and Mozart. And the Mozart is actually based on an aria from Don Giovanni. I think you're gonna love it. It's beautiful. It's short. It's just to the point. And I can't believe that my chamber music experience, my first one with Maestro Devlin, is actually going to be on the internet.
I know we're doing all sorts of new and creative things, but that's one of the beautiful things I think about what's going to happen is that we as an orchestra community are adapting to the new reality, right? And so I've never played virtual duets. Some of the things we're going to have to do are going to be on click track, where all the players will be listening to a tempo marker in their ear to make sure that things will line up. But I am proud of our orchestra for coming together in this way, and being a part of it as a player is a real special treat for me too. And especially with the Mozart, I'll tell everybody a little secret that this aria is Don Giovanni coming to the window, De viene al finestra, and he is playing a mandolin and seducing the woman in the balcony above. And of course, when we were dividing up the parts, I told Rowie, okay, you be the mandolin and I'm going to be Don Giovanni. How about that? So I think that's going to be really fun to do. But this connects to maybe my finest memory as the conductor of the Wheeling Symphony so far. Speaking of Mozart, was something that we did together in November. And we just came off of a meeting with some of our supporters, and you told this beautiful story about what that experience meant to you. Would you mind sharing that with everybody again?
Sure, absolutely. We were on a Zoom meeting, and I decided to play an excerpt from a short excerpt of some music, and I decided to focus on the Mozart, not only because it's my nearest and most fondest memory that I had recently with the symphony, but also because I felt I connected with the audience so deeply, and I have to tell you, I miss all of you. Also, the music itself, especially the second movement, I think it evokes hope. It's beautiful. It's not necessarily sad or happy. It's just beautiful. And as I said, it evokes hope. And I thought, what would be better than to play something that evokes hope, especially at this time?
Mm-hmm. You know, I didn't tell this story to that group, but it reminded me that when I was in college, my grandfather passed away, and I was asked to play the clarinet at his funeral as the thing that opened the service. And I actually made that same choice. I played the second movement of the Mozart concerto a cappella by myself. And I thought that's the same exact thing that you did, where it's music that at times could be thought of as maybe sorrowful or poignant, sad, but it's infused with a sense of hope, right? And I think that's where we are right now. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel distant. It's okay to be depressed or confused, because of course we feel that way. We're missing the things that we love the most in life, especially as musicians, right? But when we can find pieces of music that speak to those feelings, I think we're doing something special, not only for ourselves as the artists, but for the audience that's going to hear us. And for me, that's what this concert in a couple of weeks is going to be all about.
Absolutely. I think it's going to help us even increase and build more community through music.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rowie, I can't tell you how thankful we are and how thankful I am to have someone of your talent, but also someone with a personality like you have that embodies so much the spirit of what we think this orchestra stands for and what it means to our community. So thank you so much. And I look forward to sharing a virtual stage with you in just a couple of weeks.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me here.
Of course, Rowie. Okay. Thank you for having tuned in to this evening's episode of Monday Evenings with the Maestro. We look forward to having you join us next week on Thursday, May 28th at 8 p.m., streaming live on Facebook and Instagram for our 90th anniversary celebration, a virtual concert. I also want to thank our guest this evening, Betsy Delk, the interim executive director of the Wheeling Symphony, for telling us a little bit about the concert and how it's been designed. Sarah Kirkland Schneider, a composer whose work we are excited to feature on the concert, and Rowie Mazzare, our principal clarinetist, who's going to be a featured performer on that evening's event. So on behalf of the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra, we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for supporting your community in concert.